to call this meeting to order. In the beginning, we'd like to recognize the traditional territories. The land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Attawandarock, and Mississauga peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. The territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering is home to many Indigenous peoples made up of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement should remind us of our responsibility to ensure the dish, the territories on which we live and work, is never emptied, and that we take care of the land and its inhabitants in a way that ensures its future sustainability. Welcome to this hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of St. Catharines. Everyone present will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. There are two major types of applications to this committee: applications for consent and severance, and applications for minor variance to municipal bylaw requirements. Evidence may be required to be given under oath if deemed necessary. Please address your comments and questions through myself, the Vice Chair. Additionally, please maintain respect while communicating with the committee staff and other meeting participants to ensure smooth, orderly discussion. Copies of decisions will be mailed to the applicant and to any other person who appeared before the committee or filed a written request to receive a notice of decision. Pursuant to More Homes Built Faster Act and in the matter of consent application, the applicant, the minister, or a specified person or public body that has an interest in the matter has the right to appeal either the decision itself or the conditions of consent to the Ontario Land Tribunal within 20 days of the mailing of the decision. Minor variance decisions may also be appealed. However, they must be made within 20 days of the making of the decision, and the cost of the appeal is $400. Are there any amendments or additions to the agenda?
There is one small amendment actually to the April 23rd, 2025 draft minutes. As Member Copeland was not in attendance and we had him under in attendance. So we'll modify them.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Dale, thank you. May we have a motion to adopt the minutes of the April 16th meeting and the April 23rd meeting, noting the amendment? Tom? Does any member of this panel have a conflict of interest in any of the applications to be considered at this hearing or the previous hearing if they were not in attendance? Nor do I. Are there any requests for withdrawal or adjournment?
There are none.
Okay. Yep. Our first order of business then is a request for minor changes of conditions. Staff has requested a minor change in condition to remove conditions number 1 and 2 that related to the street widening. The applicant is not present. Are there any questions from the committee? Is there anyone here to speak to this? Could we have a motion, please?
I move that we remove the 2 conditions as presented in the memorandum from file number, as I'm looking for it, B0825SC.
All those in favor?
Can we just add that it's minor in nature? Just that it's minor. You want the whole? No, as long as it's a minor change of conditions? Yeah.
And it was unanimous. We'll move on to our second application, variance application A2725 for 11 Manhattan Court. is requesting a reduction of parking spaces for an interior accessory dwelling unit from 0.5 spaces to 0 spaces. Would the owner or the agent come forward? The owners are Tim and Rose Latanzi. The agent is Nicholas Godfrey from Upper Canada Consultants, and the planner is Dasha Litviniuk. Could we have your name and address, please?
I'm Nicholas Godfrey. I'm with Upper Canada Consultants at 330 Hanover Drive.
I assume you've reviewed the technical report and aware of
I
the
have,
recommendation to approve. Is there anything you wish to add?
Through you, Chair, no, I am in agreement with the report, and that is all.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? Anyone here to speak to this file? Could we have a motion?
Following consideration of all written and oral presentations, I move that a variance application for A2725 as presented in the notice of hearing be approved as recommended. As the situation is minor in nature and appropriate and desirable for the use of the land and are in keeping with the general intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw.
All those in favor? Dale, are you in favor? That's approved unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next application, application A1725 for 20 Black Walnut Common. They're requesting permission to build a 15-unit townhouse complex on a private road when the bylaw states that no person shall develop or construct any building or structure and otherwise use any lot unless the lot fronts on a public road. Requesting a reduction of required parking spaces for the principal dwelling from 1.75 parking spaces to 1.25 parking spaces. Requesting an increase in the maximum percentage of unit width for the driveways from 50% to 95%. A reduction of the distance from the front wall of the dwelling to the private street from 2 meters to 1 meters. A reduction of the distance from the rear wall of the dwelling at unit 8, or sorry, from the rear wall of the dwelling to the private road from 2 meters to 1.2 meters. A reduction of the distance from the garage to the private street from 6 meters to 1.2 meters. An increase in the maximum building height from 10.8 meters to 11 meters, and a reduction in the minimum landscaped open space from 25% to 21%. I see we have an agent here. Could you give us your name and address?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
You want me to present?
I'd like your
Okay.
name and address first,
By the
please.
way, I'm,
Could I get your name and address first, please?
I beg your pardon?
Could I get your name and address first, please?
Name and address?
Could I get your name and address?
Yes. It's Glenn Barr. I'm representing Better Neighborhoods Incorporated. We're the agent for the owners. The owners are in the audience.
Okay, the planner for this file is Shraddha Arun. I'm assuming that you've reviewed the technical report and are aware that the recommendation is for an approval. Is there anything you wish to add?
Once again, I'm having trouble hearing.
I assume you've read the report
Yes, I have.
and understand that it's for an approval. Is there anything you wish to add?
Yes, I do. Is it your normal practice to have the planner present or be myself present? Myself?
I'm asking you to present.
What's that? Mr. Chairman, everybody can hear from this speaker, except for me. If you could put the first slide up for me, please. Just the first one will be fine, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm fairly well known around town, and especially, I think most of the audience is here as a result of this being part of Village on the 12. I'm the developer of Village on the 12 originally, and this is a concept that my partner and I generated back in the late 1990s and early in 2000s. This plan was developed 2001. This is the most 2001 master plan, and you can see in red that the subject, what we're trying to deal with, is outlined in red. Okay. Even though I'm the developer, I'm no longer the owner. We're no longer the owner of that area in red. We know it as Stage 5B, and it's owned by a company that is coming in to build those 15 townhouses. We're their agents and engineers and planners for that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a little bit of context. I'm not going to speak a lot. I'm just going to give a little bit of context because the staff report is quite complex, but it's complex for different reasons than you might think, okay? I will try to simplify it, if I may. Just as a context for Village on the 12, I'm sure that the committee's already been out there. We started this in actually 1986 when the developer built Grenadier Place. My partner and I bought the rest of this in the late 90s, and we've been developing it ever since according to new urbanist principles. And we've gone through stages 2, 3, 4, 5A, 6, and 7 to where we've got it to this point, okay? Stage 5B, which is the area in red, was zoned for a 30-unit apartment building, 4-story apartment building, or alternatively for townhouses. And it's been like that since 2001. What's happened is, since that time, of course, developments occurred all around it, and now these folks wish to build the 15 townhouses, and of course, we're encouraging them to do that. Could I have the next slide, please, Rosa? This was the apartment building design, the front of it on Black Walnut Common, and it was approved, and there was even a site plan agreement registered. They were ready to build about 18 months ago. Because of the turn of the economy, and especially the economy that's turned now that because of the American Revolution, the option for building apartments now is not very good right now. So they've decided to change it to townhouses, and thank goodness back in the early 2000s we had rezoned it for townhouses, so it's all set to go for townhouses. Now, if I could have the next slide, please. Whoop, there we are. There are the architect's sketches. It's ACK that did the architectural sketches, the front on the left and the rear laneway elevation on the right. ACK, Mike Allen's group, also did stages 6 and 7, which are the townhouses when you go in on Willowbank Common on the right-hand side and at the back at the right-hand side. I'm very happy with their architecture. Next slide, please. That is the ones that we did, and some of these people live in these townhouses, that we did in then around 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. And the proposed townhouses are essentially the same form. The same form, and they'll be the same condominium ownership. And they will have similar setbacks, similar heights, with the exception of a few inches. Essentially, we're following the same format. Basically, that's it. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay. This is what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to maintain the nature, the urban design nature of the village, because it's a very special urban design. We established the urban design back in the early 2000s. This is more in line with what's being built now because of the pressure for affordable housing or attainable housing. And even though this could be built, we're trying to avoid building this kind of thing. So if I could go back to the slide before this, and that'll be fine. Okay, so the complication here, the staff report, I think it's about 5 or 6 pages long, I think. And there's, I think, a total of 8 minor variances, okay? The reason why this is necessary is that between the time that we built the first phase, which is 12 townhouses, and this phase, even though it's the same form, the same nature, roughly the same height, all the setbacks are essentially the same, the city changed its bylaw and made it more complicated. They also made the interpretation of the bylaw a lot more complicated. In other words, what they've done is in the first phase, the rear lane was not considered a private street. Now this is a private street, and so all of a sudden the setbacks and all of the complications of zoning are required to accommodate the interpretation of the back lane being a private street. So we ended up with several minor variances required essentially for the same thing. In the first phase, I think I only got 1 or 2 minor variances that were necessary. But that's really, and the staff has done a really good job at going through in a detailed version of what needed to be done so that we don't get caught at the building permit stage. Essentially, that's what this is all about. I can answer questions, no doubt, perhaps I can answer questions once I think that there's 1 or 2 people that want to make a presentation. But that's it in an essence, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee at this point? I'd like to address the 3 written comments that were received. So that there's an understanding that they were received, and 2, that they were heard. Variance 1 was seeking permission to build a private road, and residents have expressed concerns relating to access for emergency and garbage vehicles. The staff report states that the intent of the zoning bylaw is to ensure that all properties have direct access to a public road, facilitating emergency services, municipal maintenance, and public infrastructure connectivity. It goes on to say city staff is satisfied that the subject lands will maintain consistent and adequate access to Martindale Road, a public road, over private roads, Black Walnut and Tulip Tree Common, as existing easements or rights of way and other agreements are registered on title. In a conversation with the planner, I was advised that all roadways met the bylaw requirements and were reviewed by the Transportation Department and advised that there were no issues regarding access for emergency vehicles. Sharda, I just asked if you could confirm that I've interpreted that correctly.
That's correct.
Thank you. Variance 2 is seeking a reduction in parking requirements, and residents have expressed concerns that there will be insufficient parking. The staff report states that development is proposing a total of 29 spaces, and the site plan drawing showed the same. The special bylaw provision relating to this development, dating back to, I understand, 2003, requiring 1.75 spaces per principal dwelling unit, resulted in 26 spaces for the principal dwelling units, and at 0.5 spaces per accessory dwelling unit, added 4 spaces, requiring a total of 30 spaces. In the conversation with the planner, I was advised that the current bylaw requires only 1.25 spaces per principal dwelling. As the applicant commented, the bylaw has changed since the original planning. At 1.25 spaces per principal dwelling, the 15 principal units would require 19 spaces plus 4 spaces for the accessory dwelling units, requiring a total of 23 spaces as currently set out in the site plan. A further 4 spaces would be required if accessory dwelling units were in all 15 units, bringing the total requirement to 27. As a result, the development as currently planned will be 1 space short of the required spaces under the special regulation and 6 spaces greater than the current bylaw requirement. Should all dwellings contain an accessory dwelling unit, the 29 spaces would be 2 greater than the current bylaw requirements. Residents also expressed concerns relating to the lack of designated visitor parking, and I have confirmed with the planner that there are no bylaw requirements for visitor parking. Did I get that right, Charlie?
That is correct.
Thank you. Variance 3 is seeking an increase in the driveway width, and residents have expressed concerns for safety of pedestrians, drivers, and deliveries. The staff report states that the increase in width of the driveways accessing the garage is due to the size of the garage being nearly the full rear width of each unit. This configuration contributes to a safer public realm by relegating vehicle access and road infrastructure to the rear of the site, allowing front yards to be enhanced with landscaping and avoid frequent conflicts with pedestrians. As the driveways are located at the rear, there is no adverse visual impact on the streetscape. Residents have expressed concerns that the parking spaces may be inadequately sized, and the planner has advised that the parking spaces meet the required size as outlined in the bylaw, and as a result should fit any current vehicle. Did I interpret that correctly?
That is correct.
Thank you. Variance 4 is requesting a reduction of the front yard setback facing the private road. Residents have expressed concerns that the reduction would seem very close to the street, restricting and confining, reducing light, green space, and gardens. In reviewing the site plan, the 1 meter setback I observed was at Unit 12. All other setbacks are 2 meters or greater. The planner explained to me that there was a provision to allow 1 meter setback. It made sense to me when she told me, but I'm not sure I could explain it, so I would ask her to do the same.
To the chair, the setback that's requested to 1 meter from a private street along Tulip Tree Common and Black Walnut Common is requested to essentially the front porches because of a basement entrance that accesses a basement unit beneath those front porches. So that porch is considered to form part of the main dwelling rather than just a porch. So those porches, because they extend beyond the face of the dwelling, come within 1 meter of the private road. So they have requested this reduction in setback to 1 meter, whereas the actual main dwelling behind the porch will continue to sit at that 2 meters.
I thought Chandra also mentioned something about the agreement allowing this to occur. Oh, okay. Variants 5 and 6 are requesting a reduction to the rear yard setback. Residents have expressed concerns that this reduction may not be safe for drivers, deliveries, pedestrians, or emergency services. The staff report states, while the laneway access is technically a private road, it is not functioning as a prominent streetscape and is not a pedestrian path. Given that the internal laneway functions as a low-speed private access route, and there is inclusion of some landscaping, no negative impact on the site, on-site function, safety, or aesthetics are anticipated. It goes on to say the design maintains adequate space for pedestrian movement, soft landscaping, and vehicular access, while ensuring that garages remain located at the rear of the units. Shraddha, is there anything you wish to add to that?
So the variances at the rear of the dwelling and to the garage are mostly technical variances. It is because of the internal laneway going from inside the development, which is causing the reduction of from 2 to 1.2 meters at the rear of the dwelling, because the dwelling line is at the end of the garage, and the the reduction from 6 to 1.2 meters is typically the same as the main dwelling line, and the garage line is the same at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Variance 8 is requesting a reduction in the landscaped open space. Residents have expressed concerns regarding a reduction in landscaping. The staff report states that the requested reduction of 4% results primarily from a compact development form, which incorporates rear-loaded garages and private driveways off an internal private street. It goes on to state that the overall site design maintains the intent of the landscape open space requirement through rooftop terraces and balconies that provide amenity areas, landscaped islands at the rear of the townhouses, and street-facing landscaping and tree planting in front of the houses. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The report basically speaks to the fact that the development is currently seeking site plan approval to construct the project as identified. Should all or a portion of the variances be approved, the site plan will be finalized and the project will proceed as presented in the site plan drawing and the sketches and layouts of the development. The result will be parking that exceeds the current bylaw requirement, provides accessible rear driveways, front yard setbacks that meet or exceed the bylaw requirements, and offers sufficient landscaping open space for residents. That is a summary of the report and that addresses the comments that we've received. I hope this summary from the staff report has provided clarification and understanding relating to the residents' concerns and why staff are in support of this proposal. Is there anyone in the gallery who wishes to speak to this application? And if so, I would ask that they add information that has not already been presented. Come forward. Sit at the top of the horseshoe, please. And could we have your name and address, please?
Got it. Okay. So my name is Jerry Castler. I live at 44 Tulip Tree Common. And as you've noticed in the audience, we do have quite a few people here from the development. A number of us got together and looked at this, went through it many times. We had a discussion, Glenn and I, and the committee, what we call the VOT operating committee, had a discussion with Glenn and got some clarification. And so instead of everyone trying to speak, we've decided to summarize this and speak to 4, I think, of the, maybe 5 of them, okay? Yeah, 5 of the minor variances. And some of this is going to give you a little different perspective from what you've heard from planning, and we'll just work our way through it. So I've brought a copy for each of you if you, what we're going to speak, because we're going to get into some numbers and stuff. 4? Okay. Glenn, would you like one? Okay. Okay. Sorry, next one, yeah. I knew it was the reason I brought 6. Oh, sorry, I need that one back. There's no difference in the words here, except for my handwriting. Okay. All right, so the request is for 8 minor variants in relationship to the site plan, which you've mentioned is not approved yet. Any change to the site plan may change our concerns on each minor variance request. So we'd like to request the Committee of Adjustments to limit any approval that may be granted to these requests be for this site plan only, because you can dramatically change the site plan and then how they're interpreted creates other issues. So I'm not sure if you can do that, but we're asking.
Could I seek some clarification from planning as to if this is associated specifically to this site plan?
To the chair, this particular application is tied to the site plan application, which is currently in process. And after the minor variances go through, whatever is the decision from the committee would be applied to the site plan as well.
But would be specifically to this site plan, if there were changes, we'd go through this process again?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, so the first one about building the proposed townhouses. We have no objection to the concept of building townhouses on this property. However, it's critical that the project meets the requirements of the bylaw, the special provision 19, and the approved site plan, and of course, any minor variances that are approved. We do have some concerns with the design and integration with existing homes and services. We expect that throughout the permit issuing process, the builder or developer will obtain input and agreement with the VOTT operating committee before proceeding. We expect the city to be able to enforce this, similar to what the city does when it issues permits for building. They get input from different areas. And the reason we say that is it's going to impact, it's going to open up the road that's there today to make sewer hookups and things like that, and we just want to be on the same page. We don't question at all that the developer has the right to do these things. We just want to do it all above board and document it so we have a thorough understanding and no issues. Okay?
Could I ask planning if they can agree to those requests?
To the chair, all the drawings which have been shown here would be tied to the site plan and would process all the variances which are shown here.
The request is whether or not the city can enforce a requirement for the builder or the developer to work with the VOTT operating committee.
To the chair, I don't believe the city would enforce something outside what's already required because I understand there are shared agreements on the site, but I don't believe that's a mechanism the city could place in a site plan. No, if there's already an obligation to work with them, then absolutely that would have to happen.
Okay. So I'll give you just a quick example. Someone in phase 6, I guess it is, got a building permit. The building permit got issued. The documentation was very clear. This person should get and notify any property owners or any other properties that was going on. They came and did the work, went over 4 properties, didn't notify anybody. So the city is aware of these issues, and it's because we have private roads, you have to figure out a way to work together. We're not asking the city to do a lot of work. All we're asking the city to do is make sure you've got an agreement. The same way that the city asks that you have an agreement with the Conservation Authority, that you have an agreement with the hydro company, and with all these other ones, because otherwise we run into surprises, and that's the last thing we want. And I don't think when the people that are building this want surprises either. We all want to be on the same page.
My understanding is that the agreement is the site plan.
Okay.
Am I correct?
To the chair, yes, that is correct.
But I'm talking about issuing building permits and sewer permits and all the rest of the permits. That's where we get into issues.
Well, that all happens through the building permit process, I presume.
To the chair, yes, the building permit process it sounds like you've had some notification requirements through that process already. I don't think the city can do anything to prevent people from breaking those contracts, from breaking the rules. If they did something against the agreement, I'm not sure what could be done proactively. But my understanding is there are shared facilities and sort of infrastructure agreements amongst Village on the 12th. So the city will do what they can through their site plan agreement and building permit requirements. And I expect those agreements will also carry their weight. So we'll certainly work with, as far as we can, the community to make sure that those are upheld.
Okay. All I'm trying to do is prevent future problems. I'm not trying to make it more difficult. So, okay. Okay,
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm delighted to have Jerry and his committee have made communications a lot better, okay? We have to remember that this is stage 5B. We've gone through all the various stages. They are all controlled not only by the building permit process, but also the site plan agreement process and other processes. And the key to making things work is the communications, okay? And we've really tried hard, both Jerry and his committee and ourselves, to make sure that that's the case. And I'm delighted that my clients are in the room. They appreciate that as well. Putting more regulations in place, I'm not sure is of any value. Communications is the answer. Thank you very much.
all right. So now when there was a discussion about the required parking spaces. This is our perspective of it. The bylaw requirement is 1.25 parking spaces per townhouse, as was mentioned. A special provision for this site is included in the bylaw, which specifies 1 3/4 parking spots per unit and supersedes what's in the bylaw. Some of the items in this provision 19 are stricter than what's in the bylaw, and some are more relaxed than what's in the bylaw. And the idea that I can gather why there's a provision is that it's the way it was designed originally. Glenn mentioned this goes back to 2001, I guess. And so that's how it fits into these properties. We have constraints on land and all kinds of other things. So from that perspective, we believe that you don't cherry pick the provision or the bylaw. Either one is the one you follow or the other one is the one you follow, and then you go from that perspective.
I hear you. I guess from my perspective, if going through the report and speaking with the planner earlier today, there will be 29 parking spaces regardless of the calculation.
Right.
At 1.75, there would be 30 required, one less.
Okay. So
Whether it drops to 1.25 or stays at 1.75, it's
So I have a recommendation.
kind of a moot point.
Well, no, I don't think it is, but I will explain
Well,
that.
I'd say it's kind of a moot point because the site plan requires the construction of 29 parking spaces.
Okay. So we're going to propose on how we can do that. Okay? There is no other parking available for the residents within the VOTT community. All private road parking is for visitors only. Recently, we had a phase 7 that was completed, and not enough parking was provided to 2 of the homes. And we've had conflicts where people think they should be able to park on the street. The parking spots are for visitors, but it's very clear in all the documentation that they're not. We're trying to eliminate things up front. Okay, so now let's get into the numbers. The site plan identifies 29, as you mentioned, based on the requirement of 1.75 and a half a unit and a half for each ADU. The total requirement here is 30.25. I guess you rounded it to 30, but that's what the paper says, right? Okay. We believe sufficient parking should be provided at all times. However, if a minor variance is approved, we think that the number should be reduced from 1.75 to 1.65. That aligns to the 29. You multiply out the numbers, you get 28 and a half or something like that. I don't have the number in front of me, but then it ties to the site plan. We don't have to reduce it all the way to 1.25. There's no reason to do it. So why wouldn't we just reduce the minor variance, just reduce it to 1.65? Somebody needs to answer, I guess.
Through the chair, to the public, if we reduce the variance from 1.75 to 1.65, we technically round it off to the nearest number after 0.5, which will be again 2 spaces per unit, which would not adhere to the request of the applicant, and will again result 2 spaces per unit as already there. But reducing it to 1.25 would allow 1 space per unit plus an ADU space of 0.5 after the reduction.
So my math says you multiply 15 by 1.65, and you get 24.75. And then you add 4 for the ADUs, and you get 28.75. And the developer is providing 29. So that meets the requirement, doesn't it?
Through the chair, that math is correct. That would be the proportion of parking spaces that would result in the 29 spaces that are shown. Staff do support a reduction to 1.25. This does reflect general standards across the city, and we are supportive of it, which is what our report states and is what was requested. However, we do recognize that's what the plan shows, and the committee can certainly consider that.
Sorry, I didn't understand the last part of what you said.
Through the chair, just that the committee can certainly consider an alternate approval. Staff continue to support a 1.25 ratio, recognizing they are providing more. It does allow flexibility in the design for later at a rate that staff are supportive of and comfortable with. So our recommendation continues to stand, and the committee can consider your comments as well in their decision.
Okay. So if we're going to change what's in the provision, then we need to open up the whole provision and go back to the bylaw. You can't have a provision that says this is what should be used for this property and then say, well, the bylaw's lower on this one, so we can lower that. Those trade-offs were already done in the first set of negotiations to build something that made sense for this area. And the provision was put into the bylaw so that we continue to develop this land along the same guidelines. And now, again, if you want to change it, that's fine, let's change it. But let's go through a process and review everything in the provision.
We've heard you. There's 3 options on the table.
Okay.
1.75, 1.65, and 1.25.
Right.
That will be up to the person who makes the motion.
Fine, okay. We're fine with that. Okay. An increase in the the maximum width of the driveway from 50 to 95%. This request turns the rear yards of the proposed townhouses into mostly just a laneway and driveways with little greenery. The amount of greenery becomes in the low single digits at the ground level. However, the applicant has shown us a landscape plan and does plan to plant some trees in some of that green space, and then tied what they're doing with the balconies, it makes sense, okay? So it's really, the landscape plan, when we start to reduce the amount of landscape, the landscape plan becomes critical on what type of plants and trees, and we'll touch a little bit more of that on the last point. Okay? Any questions on that? No. Okay. Additionally, for this one, there's a lack of space for snow accumulation, removal, and storage. Even an average snowfall will most likely require hauling the snow away. Ultimately, this will lead to higher operating costs for the residents that live in these homes, and that's more of an awareness. If there is an answer on how to minimize that ongoing cost, I think people would be interested in it, but for the most part, we just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that this will drive up our operating costs for the house. Okay. The next one is about the minimum setback from 2 meters to 1 meter. The standard in the bylaw is 3 meters. The special provision reduced it to 2, and now the request is to reduce it to 1. The current townhomes that are built to the south of this development have similar setbacks of approximately 2.5 meters. We measured that for the main wall. With the front porch, the setback is approximately 1.3 meters on the homes that are already there. And the proposed site plan does show, there's a line on each side that shows that the setback for the main walls are 2.5 meters, 2.56 to be exact. And the requirements of the minor variances due really to the porches and the balconies, which I think the planning department highlighted. Our request here is that the reduction in setback should be restricted to apply only to the protrusions, such as porches and balconies. Because if it just says the setback is 1 meter, the site plan could be changed at a future date, and we have walls that are 1 meter away from the property line, which is next to a sidewalk, which is next to a road. You're less than 2 meters from the road to the wall, and that would not work.
It's my understanding from conversation earlier today that the site plan would be what was constructed, and as a result, the 2.5 meter to the main wall would be in place. And as they mentioned earlier, should the site plan change, we're back into this process all over again.
Okay, we're fine with that. And then the last item is the reduction in landscaped open space from 25 to 21%. The bylaw requirement for this property, which is an R3, is 35%. The provision allowed this to be reduced to 25%, and now a further reduction of 21%. The only thing we wanted to add and make everybody aware that it really becomes critical that the landscape plan addresses this with significant amount of quality plants and trees, especially in the front. The last development for 5A has grown in nicely. It really looks really nice, and we expect that the new one would match that similarly moving forward.
My anticipation would be that, based on the comment that the application is suggesting they want to maintain the integrity of the development, but I would ask.
That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
If I may. That's the whole idea, and I've got 3 or 4 comments. Are you done, Jerry?
I'm done.
If I may, Mr. Chairman? I'm really proud of what we've done in the village. You notice that I'm sure the committee went to take a look at it, and I'm sure that you've been there many, many times. I've been here at the table many times over Village on the 12th. You know, I think if it's not the best new neighborhood in the city, I'm not sure, it must be right up there, okay? And one of the things that we've tried to accomplish is removing the car-dominated environment of our streetscapes. Initially, what we did was we set a standard for ourselves that we were not going to have more than 1 garage door facing the street along Black Walnut Common and Tulip Tree Common. And we accomplished that. We actually sold houses that didn't have any garages, which at the time, the real estate industry was telling us nonsense, okay? So we've accomplished that. And if you went for a drive and you go for a drive now, you'll find that there's not that sense of constant parking, a constant clutter caused by cars. We've done the same thing in Stage 5B. What we've done is we've put the townhouses Stage 5B with a rear lane just like on Stage 5A. As a result, you don't have any driveways and cars parking the front. If you did it in the conventional way, you'd have my last slide there, which is stacked townhouses facing the street, eliminating all the parking along the streets, and generating more cars parked on the driveway. So we've got more parking on this site than I think you'll find just about anywhere in the city in a townhousing site. And I think we've done a pretty good job, and these folks here have gone along with us to follow the same routine. And I'm very pleased that they have. And I think the architect has done a really good job. The interesting thing about what Jerry said about, I'm not sure this is totally understood. I tried hard to get that, but the cities, one of the things that the city's imposed in the last little while is they're trying to get away with using the whole front yard for parking, okay? Back about 15 years ago when they brought in a new bylaw, At that time, they were starting to creep up, so you'd have 2 cars parked in front of every house, and some of these houses were only 6 or 7 meters wide. So they imposed this part of the bylaw is that you can't use more than 50% of your front for parking your car or having a garage. Good idea. I didn't think it was tight enough, but nevertheless, a good idea. What's happening is that that's creeping up now, and it's causing more of a problem across the city, and not only this city, but across the whole GTA. So the way to solve that is through a rear lane. So on the front of these houses, there's no driveways, no garage doors. It's all in the rear lane, and it's all private. So we've accomplished what we're trying to accomplish in spades, quite frankly, okay? The other thing that does is that, and Jerry mentioned something about snow clearing. It's a condo. The condo's going to be made up, they're going to have their own budget. If the condo has trouble with snow piling up, they hire a pickup truck, or they hire a truck and a shovel, and they take it away. One thing that was misunderstood before, and that is that the setbacks to the buildings are almost identical to the setbacks in Stage 5A. What's different is the interpretation of what a building is. We've gotten interpretation of a building to include the front porches now. And in some cases, the front porches are being interpreted as a building because there's a door underneath the front porch. Okay, so it's a different interpretation. That's all it is. The form's the same. It's just an idiosyncrasy of the interpretation and the new bylaw that requires the minor variance. And that's really, in a nutshell, what the whole thing's all about. Thank you.
Did you have anything further? Thank you.
I think we're on the same page. The only concern is the risk that something happens in the future, where we have that covered off, that if there's a different site plan, we need to look at these minor variances.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the gallery? I'd ask that you come forward and please add something new to the conversation.
Thank you. I believe I would by looking at the problem a little bit more general rather than specific numeric details to convey.
Could we get your name and
Concerns. My name is Dennis.
yeah, and turn on your microphone, please. Got it.
My name is Dennis Maftey, and I'm here to address the proposed housing development located at 1220 Black Walnut. We know it as Village on the 12th, but since there are several condominiums in our little village, I will identify ours as the one most connected and most concerned with the additions. The owner of the lot where the houses will rise is one of our condo members, Unit 13. I should start by saying that we're very pleased to see that the proposal includes houses in keeping with the style and character of our community. And I say this with great relief because the previous proposal was an alternative which I first called a monstrosity, but I will refrain from calling it the same way. I only mention it because the city approved it without any input from the community and against the objections raised by the condominium when we became aware of it. Thank God the developer
I
changed.
just want to take a second there. That could possibly be because there were no variances and no requirements for any changes. So the bylaw, if the bylaw allowed it, it would go forward.
It could be a technicality, I know. We had a meeting at the planning group, so we were told that that's the way it was. I don't want to raise that point now. I'm just saying that I'm happy that we have the chance to communicate to you what our concerns are. And the concerns, well, I will save time and not elaborate the reasons why we were unhappy with the review process. We perceive the review process as perfunctory. And that can be discussed separately, so let me jump straight into what are the few sore points for us. The first objection, and it's a general one, and again, the objection is not to the project, which we like and support. It has to do with the request for relaxation of the municipal bylaws, and in principle, norms and regulations are developed in order to achieve desirable results, and therefore, they cannot be ignored or relaxed unless there are valid reasons why such relaxations benefit the project. Surprisingly, the evaluations submitted by the various city departments recite bylaws, give explanations, justification of the constraints, and then automatically recommend approval of the transgression of the norm as requested, but without any justification or argumentation thereof. And reading the material made me wonder, why do we have rules if we so easily approve not respecting them? I will give you only one example that I found particularly curious. In his response, the person providing forestry comments says, 20 Black Walnut Common. Forestry would have no objection as long as the proper tree protection, probably guidelines, he wanted to say, are followed during construction. We know that the space available for tree planting in our village is often so narrow that many units had to remove the trees because they grew too big in close proximity to the houses. And we also know that the typical tree protection zone extends at least a 2-meter radius outside the canopy drip tree circle. So when we're talking about 1 meter or less, this answer appears to be meaningless in terms of what the tree needs. So obviously, it doesn't refer to trees. I will leave aside the already mentioned criticism of variations approved without any evaluation of their deleterious effects, and I will concentrate on the main objection to the plan. Again, we find it desirable, but there is one word that hit us: densification. We're cramming more and more people in a confined space, and I want to convey this idea. Our little village has only one access road for entry and exit, and the streets are very narrow. There is not enough parking in the central core, and because we're constrained by 2 streets in an elliptic island, any visitor, delivery, or service vehicle that cannot find a spot has to leave the village. I witnessed a fire truck that had to park further away than optimum, and that was the fireman's opinion. And I asked why. He said because the narrow and curved access road was leaving no room for an ambulance or other vehicle to pass. People who wished to leave the area had to perform 3-point maneuvers to turn around, obviously impeding one another. Luckily, that alarm was minor. But what if it had been serious? We are confined, and the picture was showing this. As it is, we have to think of an alternative. Emergency exit, and in this situation, any relaxation from bylaws regulating setbacks and distances is perceived by all residents as an important and serious issue. We feel that the cavalier manner in which the city may have intended to approve densification requests made by the developer is dangerous and should be reviewed. We like the project, but not at a very high risk. In this context, the inconvenience of having to trudge with garbage bags through our houses because the back alley is so narrow that no truck can have access may appear trivial indeed. But when the plan contemplates increased access via the same narrow alley and with a reduced setback provided for the new houses, we're justifiably alarmed. We expect that the city will not approve such densification steps that impact us seriously without even providing some discussion or justification as to why this is not acceptable. The proximity of the new houses to existing structures is such that the provisions of the building code are severely tested. it has been noted that protective design elements address some risks insofar as the new buildings impact on one another. That has been addressed. But the already existing houses that will now face the new dwellings in close proximity were not treated with the same attention. With the already high level of concern regarding fire risk and vehicular access, we request a serious consideration of our worries. And since this address is not intended to rehash the detailed objections that we expressed in writing, written materials to the city, I will only mention one last element of our predicament. We love the village. We love the Garden City. We live here because we enjoy nature. But the developer proposes to reduce the landscape area below the legal limit. And the planners of the Garden City are prepared to approve it, again, without any discussion as to why they do not respect their own regulation. It may appear to be a minor concern compared with the traffic and fire risks, but I will tell you why it's not. 50 years ago, I picked a corner of paradise for my home in the city of Toronto. It was a very livable city in those days, and the beaches area with its boardwalk and parks was the best. I expected to move out of there feet first to join my dad in St. John Norris Cemetery, but a bad wind started to blow in the area. They called it densification. And when they tore down the Gardiner that was intended to extend to 401 via Kingston, were pushed out. Traffic was hellish, and the only growth in population appeared to be mostly in the homeless and beggars category. We searched for a few years all along the shores of Lake Ontario until we reached St. Catharines, Garden City. And we found another quarter of paradise in Village on the 12th. Now I'm afraid that the same bad wind has started to blow around here. Watch out. Once you start densification, it's hard to reverse it. Usually you have to wipe the boards clean and start again. None of us will live long enough for that. Those are the general observations.
Thank you.
If you want the written, I can provide.
Anyone else wish to speak? Any questions from the committee? Tom? Oh. Could you give us a minute? Tom, you had a question?
Yeah, through you to staff, just a couple of clarifications about the site plan relative to a couple of the variances and what was discussed. So what I heard was what was proposed on the site plan relative to the setbacks and the porches, that can't be altered even if the variance was granted as the full setback. So how come that can't be changed? But if 29 spaces are proposed, why can that be changed? And why is there a push for 1.25 versus 1.65?
Through the chair, technically there can be minor changes made within the variances, so there could be some flexibility in the design for building walls. It's not that if any tiny change happens, it needs to come back to the committee, but if any significant change did, our notices of decision do state that the decision only applies to the proposal that was considered. So it would be a bit of a judgment call, but that the fact is that if you do approve a lower parking rate of 1.25, that it does allow them flexibility to remove some parking spaces because that is what is approved. The setback to the houses, the reason there's not discussion of different options in that case is because the main wall of the dwelling is interpreted to be the front of the porch due to the access to the basement beneath it. So that number does need to be to the main wall of the dwelling to allow what is currently on the site plan. Whereas the parking reduction is asking for some flexibility. What's reflected on the site plan doesn't match the number they're asking for, and we've acknowledged that. But in terms of the setback to the dwellings, what they've asked for is reflected here. It's an interpretation of where the main wall of the dwelling falls. But the site plan agreement will ensure that those walls remain where they are. Any attempt to move the actual main wall of the upper part of the dwelling towards the streets would reduce the landscape further, so that would bring them back to the committee. and probably cause other issues with the design. And so that's what would land them back here primarily. They can't all be at 1 meter without causing other zoning noncompliance.
Great, thank you. And also, through the chair to staff, can you clarify some of the discrepancies, I guess, on what I see on the numbers of the site plan versus what's requested? So, for example, the height was requested to 11. The site plan says 10.9. Also, it shows 19.2 landscape percentage versus 21 that was asked. And then, in addition, can you maybe clarify what the technical nature was about the height discrepancy versus 10.8 that was mentioned in the staff report?
Through the chair to the committee member. So first of all, related to the discrepancies, it is at the applicant to request the numbers and to have some flexibility during construction. And we did review the request, which did not impact, and as per our opinion, is stated in the report. So they did mention 19% as a landscape percentage, but they asked for 21% to have some flexibility during the construction. Also with the height, the permitted height is 10.8, but due to the grading changes in the plans, in the height of in the grading of the site, there are different portions where height is 11 meters and 10.9 meters due to the grading difference. And that is why it is a bit different from the requested number and the numbers which is shown in the plan. I hope this answers the questions.
So would a variance amended to 10.9 cause an issue, or does it need to be 11?
Through the chair to the committee member. So 11 meters is at some of the portions where the grade changes and the height is up to the 11 meters, and to cover that portion, it is requested as 11 meters.
Thank you.
I would ask that you add new information. We don't need to go over the same issues. We've definitely heard.
Wrong one, thank you.
Could we have your name and address, please?
Yes, it's Charles Crow. I'm from condo 165 Walnut Common in the village on the 12, 15 Black Walnut Common. And just speaking specifically for the proposed variance number 1, because that seems to relate to a zonal difference between a private road as a public road. And specifically, it says that no person should develop or construct a building or structure and otherwise use any lot unless the lot fronts on a public road. But thank you for letting me speak just a couple of minutes on this subject. With regard to the design-winning village on the 12, all credit to Mr. Barr. It's a beautiful village, architecturally well integrated. Was an original St. Catherine's planned lifestyle neighborhood. Beautiful architectural integration is only one component of this village community and its quality of life. The natural greenery of the common ground unites our community connection and views of a neighborhood shared with nature and each other. Our Ontario Condominium Act requires that we follow the declaration, which in our case says that the owners of the units cannot park on the road or in the visitors' units, etc. So with the proposed additional needs of 15 new units plus the accessible dwelling units for extra visitor and service vehicle spots, and the loss of 2 present visitor parking spots with the new accesses to the alley, visitor parking would become inadequate. And just a final general summary about our beautiful village, which is not only architectural but also a great community. The proposed sudden deterioration in village population densities, traffic intensity, emergency vehicle access, visitor access, garbage collection access, snow removal, roadway maintenance, only funded by the private unit owners of the village condos, not the city. I just tried to give you the picture that, the bigger picture there. So thank you for listening to a villager from and maintaining our village on the 12.
Thank you. I'm sorry you've already had your turn. To wit. Anyone else in the gallery who wishes to speak? The far right bottom.
Okay.
Can I have your name and
My name
address?
is Bill Armbrust, and I live on 20 Tulip Tree Common. I don't think enough consideration has been given to the 8 rental units. People that rent these, whether B&B or a single person, they do not have any place to park at all.
My understanding is that we, in this situation, have no impact on those sorts of issues, that people can do as they wish with their homes. Would I be correct, Charlotte?
To the chair, the 8 accessory dwelling units are permitted in many cases in the city, and this is one of them. There is a parking requirement for those units that is separate from the number that's being discussed today for the principal units. There is a requirement of 0.5 parking spaces per accessory dwelling unit, which in the case of a single unit is rounded up to 1, but in the case of multiple, such as the 8 proposed, is applied at that rate such that it adds up to 4. So there will be 4 parking spaces included in this development to serve those 8 units, and that is in line with what the city would require with or without these variances tonight. That is simply the rate that applies to accessory dwelling units in the city.
But I don't understand where these parking units are going to be for these people.
There are the 29 spaces identified on the site plan drawing.
But they're all, the 29 spaces, my understanding is referred to the parking garages.
That's correct. They're attached to each unit.
So these people that rent these units are expected to use the parking garages that belong to the owners? Is that my
One would
understanding?
presume.
That's all I have to say.
I have questions pertaining to matters that were dealt with, but if somebody wants to speak first, might accept the questions for clarification.
Can we have your name and address, please?
Yes, 25 Black Walnut Common is my address. My name is Barry Kowalski.
Thank you.
Sir, I'm a newcomer to Village on the 12 compared to most people. I was back in the day when Glenn started this project and have admired it. One thing that I do kind of find confusing about the project as a whole, though, is no one person seems to have a complete understanding in a holistic fashion as to what was developed, what the intent was, and how it's morphed into what it is today. So I was hoping I could ask a few questions of Glenn, seeing that he's the author of this project.
I would ask you to do that if you're amicable, to do that after the meeting, because my understanding is that this development has been more or less as it is since the late 90s or the early 2000s. So
My questions directly pertain to the issues that have been raised by other people, so I'm just looking for some form of clarification. I'll be very brief.
okay, I'll give you no more than 5 minutes.
All right. So insofar as the overall project is concerned, my question is there
Just your questions through me, you're not talking to.
insofar as the overall development, the Village on the 12, I'll call it the master plan for lack of a better term, are there rules and regulations that deal with material selections, that deal with minimum setback requirements that may supersede the zoning and take precedence?
Through you, I'm sorry,
I'll look after that one.
through you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, I said I'll look after that one, if you'll give me a minute. Please.
No, it's on.
To the chair, the zoning bylaw is the applicable law to the site. So that is what we would look at for building permit issuance and for site plan approval.
That answer your question, or you need further clarification?
Well, my understanding is when there are requirements that are registered against a property, that they hold with just as much weight as the zoning bylaw and often supersede the zoning bylaw because those requirements are over and above what the basic zoning bylaw provides for. So Glenn has painstakingly developed this site. I have to assume that there are some regulations, some restrictions and requirements that the planning department just may not be aware of. And I'm just asking that question. Have they reviewed those in commenting on this application?
You'd have to explain to me what restrictions, the only restrictions the city will put on is the bylaws, and any variances should they be granted this evening.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is if the planning department hasn't taken into consideration the registered covenants, restrictions, requirements that Glen bars ownership of the property imposed upon the property, then it would be difficult for them to have a holistic understanding of the entire picture of what they're approving, I would suggest.
Well, are you relating to design issues?
It could be materials, selections, for example. There could be restrictions.
My understanding-
Or it could be visitor parking.
My understanding is that materials are not part of this exercise.
Through the chair, no, the materials are not, they're not built into the zoning bylaw. I understand that the unique, the site-specific provisions that do apply to this development are laid out in this special provision that applies to this property. So it is already in the zoning bylaw. Anything above and beyond that is, if there is a private registered requirement for, say, materials, that may not be something that is considered at the building permit stage and may be a civil matter between owners and therefore wouldn't be something that the city is considering when looking at these. Only the bylaw is applicable law when it comes to issuing those permits.
Insofar as ADUs are concerned, again, the question would be, is there, and I was going to direct the question to Mr. Barr, is there any conflicting aspect to ADRs that although they're approved under the zoning bylaw, they were not anticipated in his master plan and are restricted?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Try me again.
Despite the fact that the zoning bylaw provides for ADUs, are there any restrictions within the master plan, or are there any restrictions within each condominium corporation that would restrict ADUs?
I wouldn't know that. All I know is that the bylaw allows them, and as a result, they can be built.
Then my next obvious question is are ADUs permitted throughout the village?
My expectation would be yes.
Could I ask the planner to verify that?
You certainly may.
Through the chair, that yes, they are a more recent addition to the bylaw and would be allowed now in private road developments. Previously, they were not a permitted use in any private road development. That has changed. I can't speak to them being allowed in every single unit in Village on the 12. I haven't assessed other parts of the bylaw, but as a use, yes, they would be permitted throughout.
So I, as an example, at 25 Black Walnut Common, I have a garage, single-car garage. I have a single driveway, and I would intend to apply in the next 2 weeks for an ADR. Likewise, pretty well anybody in the community, if they adhere to the same requirements as the applicant this evening, if they applied, they should receive it, or this is something that would be treated differently because our condominium corporations have not been, or our condominium corporations don't allow ADRs potentially. I just want to know if the same rules apply to everybody as they do to what's being granted this evening. Are ADRs available to everybody?
They are available to everybody. There is a set of bylaws that needed to be followed to put them in place. To use your example, if you have a single garage and a single parking space, you would be back to this committee to look for variances, and each application would be considered on its own merit.
Okay.
There is no precedent setting, so for example, whatever is decided this evening wouldn't necessarily apply to you.
And insofar as, again, speaking to the ADRs, the fact that there are 8 units versus a single unit, being my house, 25 Black Walnut Common, is the reason that it is being treated differently. The reason it is only required to have 0.5 of the space, whereas I would require 1 space, is that correct?
Through the chair, I believe maybe I understood differently the number of spaces you were saying. You're saying you have 2 full parking spaces on
Yes.
your property. In that case, then you may not be looking for a variance. Again, I'm not stating that across the board. I haven't measured your parking spaces, but if they did meet our bylaw, that would be sufficient. So it's not a different application. I believe the chair understood you only had 1 parking space,
No.
and that was the reason for his response.
You have 30 seconds.
But moving back to, I'm still looking for an answer. I'm required to have 1 parking space for an ADR because I'm a single unit. You said earlier this evening that because there are 8 units within the applicant's development, that he only has to provide 0.5 instead of 1. I'm just trying to get my head around that.
Through the chair, I can clarify that every accessory dwelling unit requires 0.5 spaces. When there is 1, our bylaw does also have a statement that anytime the number of parking spaces calculates out to a fraction, if it's 0.5 or above, you round up to the next 1 because parking spaces can't be provided in fractions. So if you had a single accessory dwelling unit with a requirement of 0.5, that would round up to 1. But in all cases, the requirement starts at 0.5. So as soon as you add a second one, the 2 0.5s would add together to a complete 1. So there would be no rounding occurring. And so on with higher numbers. If you had 3, you'd have to provide 2 spaces. If you had 4, you'd also have to provide 2 spaces.
All right, and appreciating my time limitation, my last question is, I'm just looking for verification. I had heard yesterday from a number of people that the development was a freehold development as opposed to a condominium development. There's no truth to that. It's a condominium development because it would be treated much differently if it was a freehold development.
We've certainly been told it was a condominium development. Any questions, any further questions from the committee?
Through you to staff, just a clarification, and perhaps the applicant could answer this depending on the answer. Is there a requirement to dedicate the required minimum parking spaces for an ADU for those ADUs? Or is it just part of the calculation and they can be dispersed amongst the condo as they please?
Through the chair to the committee member, there is a requirement per ADU would require 0.5 spaces per unit.
So those 4 that are applied to this, they could not be rented out for visitors or for other residents? They would have to be dedicated to ADU ownership or ADU residents?
That's correct.
Any further questions? No. Could I have a motion, please?
Following consideration of all written and oral presentations, I move that variance application A1725, as presented in the notice of hearing, be approved as recommended in the technical report, however amending variance 2 to instead read a reduction of parking from 1.75 to 1.65 per the site plan in the notice of hearing. As the variances are minor in nature, appropriate in development for the use of the land, and are in keeping with the general intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw.
Any discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor? Your application has been approved with the one amendment. A very short one, yes, given we're done.
Did you say yes?
I said a very short one, given we're done.
Did the amendment change anything in the site, in the project?
No, it did not.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Do you have any new business?
No new business.
The date of the next meeting is?
The next
Could we have some silence in the back there, please?
we're continuing.
Could we have some silence, please?
Okay.
Could we have some silence, please? Thank you.
The next meeting is June 18th at 5 p.m.
Could I have a motion to adjourn?